And we're live. It says green anyway, so I'm hoping that's correct. Do you want to say hello, Trups?
Hello, everyone.
That's not what I asked you to say. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Okay, so before we get into the political discussion, I thought I'd put this on the screen for everyone. Oh god, the chat. Fuck off, top chat. Fuck off. Yeah. Because this was the Streamlabs goal I had last to get that helmet. And after a day on that mannequin head, it's finally now set in its proper position, which is good fun. Like I had my nieces wearing it earlier. My brother-in-law tried it on. Found out he's got a tiny head. Yeah.
It looks absolutely fantastic.
I put a second. It came with two visors, but both were quite thin. So what I did was I lined them both up, attached them with double-sided tape, and then set it inside. So now you can't see people's eyes through it, which is fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah, and yeah, it looks good. Why is the chat not on here? Or maybe it's just not. Oh no, never mind. Doesn't matter. I thought I'd just quickly do a really cheeky, because I don't know if he's in the chat, but yes, I know you're hidden. Well, I did promise I'd do that. Anyway, let's move on to this. I thought we've got a few subjects today. I've got some from the UK, and Trups very kindly agreed to come up with some from the US. So who wants to start first?
Well, you can go ahead and start. It's your stream.
Okay. So it's regularly touted in the UK that our economy is stagnant, that everyone's suffering, and that this is a good enough reason to end austerity, right? Which I tend to agree. Austerity has gotten to the point where I think it now should come to an end. Our deficit, we're now in a budget surplus. So I think it's reasonable to now end austerity and try to invest to get things going again, which has been supported somewhat by the bank, who have raised the interest rate from 0.25% to 0.75%, which is the highest in almost a decade. Which while being great for savers, also means that bills for about 3.7 million people go up by about £200, which is, I'm not sure that's a good thing, since wages haven't kind of gone up to match inflation, but not inflation.
Are more skilled jobs being available?
Well, we actually have a surplus of jobs in the skilled sector, certainly in the NHS. And this is a problem that's been exacerbated by by Brexit, oddly enough, because we don't know about workers' rights for those who have come to this country, skilled workers that have come here to work here, whereas we'd like to keep them here. Of course, the EU might see otherwise and want to bend us over on that, which we'll get to soon enough, because there is going to be a little discussion on Brexit when it comes to MPs and, of course, Boris Johnson, which is something for a little bit later on, of course. And hello to the chat. I see all of you. I just yeah, you know why I don't talk to you. There were a few quotes.
That Pokemon?
Who's that Pokemon? Yes, that is Trups. Say hello again, Trups.
Hello, everyone.
Mark Carney actually revised this. Mark Carney, during Brexit, right? He was one of those that constantly talked about how our economy was going to suffer because of Brexit. He showed a bias, and because he's a representative of the bank, he put the bank on the side of Remain. But even some of his own quotes now say things are stabilising. Where was the quote? Annoyingly, because it's such a long article, which I should link to everyone or put on the screen, but I forgot to do it. Okay, it's my day off. I wanted to do things that were fun, like eat Solero and walk around all day in a Judge Dredd helmet. Where was it?
Everyone needs a hobby.
Yeah. Oh yes. So right, a lot of the criticism during PMQs, people might remember, I don't know if they do or not, was that our economy was the worst for growth in the G7, and that our country's growth had also been pretty bad. But the Bank of England themselves have confirmed, and I'll read a quote. Although the global outlook was a little softer, recent data appeared to confirm that the dip in UK output in the first quarter had been temporary, with momentum recovering in the second quarter, the labour market had continued to tighten and unit labour cost growth had firmed. Given these developments, a 0.25 percentage point increase in bank rate was warranted at this meeting to return inflation sustainably to the target. There was a little criticism on this, and it was from John McDonnell. Now, John McDonnell, for those who don't know, he is the Shadow Chancellor. He's also a Marxist and a communist. Two things he has confirmed in separate interviews. And he also is somebody recently who said, and I'm not sure what I feel on this, I dumped the topic, I think, and recommended. He, on my server, he mentioned he wanted to create something where he wanted to basically remove benefits, erase it, but instead replace it with something that every single person received in the country. A wage provided by the government.
Is this that universal wage bullshit?
Yeah! What do you think of that?
Oh, that shit's absolutely fucking retarded.
I'm just gonna take a big swig of drink while you explain that.
There was another article that I had seen that basically compared the two and said, "Oh yes, universal wages, U.S. considering it," and directly next to it was another.
That's what I heard. Yeah, this has been tried in Eastern European countries. I'm like, well, their economies are very, very weak and fickle over there. It's not surprising they'd want to try something like this, or just join Russia, because Mother Russia will look after them. Cough, cough, Crimea. Cough, cough. It's just...
They don't even want that.
No, they don't. Why would... I'm sorry, but I like... I'm not going to be drawn into the debate about socialism's perks and all that shit. I like capitalism. I like buying things.
You
I
lose
like
weight,
owning...
I guess.
Yeah, if you need to, of course. I like owning my own stuff. I like buying my own stuff. I like that I've earned my own stuff. It's like things that have reward schemes. Take YouTube. For hitting 100,000 subscribers, you receive a silver play button. I want it. Okay.
Me too, man. Me too.
You'll get it, don't worry. You'll probably get it before me, to be honest. I'll probably get deleted soon enough. You never know. You never know. But I still think that John McDonnell, he puts forward a very interesting idea, and it's very thought-provoking. But in our country, with our economy being so big, I don't see why it's such a good idea. It's almost as bad as Bernie Sanders, a multimillionaire, suggesting a medical program that would cost 2 times America's current GDP. Oh wait, he did suggest that. Are you kidding me?
$33.7 trillion.
You've seen it as well then.
Oh, yes I have.
Okay, before we talk about that, so basically John McDonnell has said as a response to all this, and I am right, Brexit is still one of the most important considerations for the bank's rate-setting committee. So the bank, because they have shown their bias, you have to be very careful in select committee meetings when you try and explain to them they cannot be biased and they have to do it based on what the current economy is showing. Right, so Shadow Chancellor has said, with wages still below 2010 levels and the gap between people's income and outgoings at record levels, the concern must be that a pattern of interest rate rises will push more families into higher levels of debt. He makes a valid point about the interest rates, especially affecting lower income people. But as there is a huge number of people who don't pay income tax, there are other factors that play into why they are in debt. It's not necessarily because of taxes or because of how much they earn. No, it is actually because of what they earn. That was stupid. I know what I meant, but I just said the wrong thing. Also, this thing about 2010 wage levels, I have to say this now. 2010 wage levels included uncapped benefits recipients of uncapped benefits, to the point where people were earning or receiving tens of thousands more than someone who worked. The tax rate then was much lower, right? So people who paid, I think it was £6,500, who received that a year, then started paying tax, whereas now it's nearer to 11,000. So his argument isn't quite valid because people started paying tax at a lower rate, but also benefits were astronomical. You cannot compare the two because they are from different times. Then was an unsustainable expense that could not be fixed without taking away a lot from the people. And that, to me, I understood. I think I'd just gotten a job at the time. I was unemployed, actually, when it happened. and I supported it. I didn't vote for it, but I supported austerity because I believed it was one of the very few options we had left that could save our economy. And even though people have suffered, including myself, I spent 4 years unemployed. During this time, I am very much aware that it is not great. But I understand enough to know that it was the right call at that time. And people seem to be totally blind to this. And that's what really bugs me. So the before I finish, why is alright? So there's a bit here at the end why the bank is poised, why they have decided to raise them. The bank has been signalling for some time that rates will need to rise to cool inflation, which surged after Brexit vote sent the pound plunging and still remains above target at 2.4%. We want to keep it at 2%. And the pound did do quite well today initially, but then it basically went back down into the red, so that our pound is not as strong as it should be when pressed up against you guys and the euro. Which, to me, is actually fine, because if I ever make shekels on YouTube, it almost translates quite nicely into pounds, which is great.
Everyone, that means support Omegon. Your tentacled overlord does request your shekels.
Streamlabs.com. Okay, I'm done with that. Your turn.
Well, where do I start? Well, I mean, it's hard to compare the American economy looking at the UK.
Yeah.
Just because I feel as if I were to try and compare it, you guys are almost, you almost have like a parent, watching over your income. Imagine being like 14 years old, not having necessarily control over all the money you get for your birthday.
Mm-hmm.
That's the EU looking at the UK. And basically, at the moment before Brexit, you guys don't really own much of your own shit, because the EU has this hanging debt, over you. And if you guys were to leave, then the EU would then lose out their money. So the concerning part that you mentioned was that the actual value of the pound going in and out of flux. That is more concerning to me, because all I can see with that is, I mean, the most common example for inflation at the moment is, looking for Venezuela. Now that's extreme. That's like the utmost extreme that anybody has ever seen. But that's the concern whenever you start seeing the value of your currency go down. The United States actually had that during 2009, I believe. Yeah, it was during our housing crisis, which basically it lost out a whole bunch of people from their jobs, and it was because the banks had tried to sell people houses that they could not afford. They wouldn't have the credit to pay off their debts, and essentially a lot of them got either evicted or they left the house never to be seen again, never to pay off that loan.
That reminds me, before you continue, of Spanish holiday homes before the economic crisis in Spain, but also timeshare properties. Quite a number of people were hit on those as well.
Yes, and actually, my parents do have certain timeshares through a certain company, so I remember I haven't necessarily been to one of those timeshares in quite some time, so I think it's rebounded, but it was concerning for a while. But interestingly enough, Trump went to Italy this past week and was talking with Italy about their economic system. Now, right now, Italy is going through a minor downswing in their currencies, but the Italian president, I believe, prime minister,
I believe.
Yeah, he actually said he was quite envious of the United States and its growth economic wise. And one of the reporters had actually asked Trump and the prime minister, how can Italy benefit the same as the United States? And the way that Trump answered it essentially accounts to follow his instructions, do what he says. He's a good man, and he knows how to do trade. If you can back him, which is honestly the important part, if you can back him up when he does trade policy, you guys will win. And I think that really hit on a very interesting point. You see a lot of articles in the American media saying that Trump is engaged in a trade war and we're
Hmm.
all going to lose. We're trying to go up against, the EU, China. We're trying to,
How low do you
push
think
all
of
the
your own
buttons.
country that you'll say that? Like, how little do
Oh,
you actually value your country?
I value my country very well, but I don't like necessarily the representatives of our country,
Mm.
meaning the media.
Well, they do portray you in a certain light.
Oh,
Um,
compared to if the world looked at us just through the lens of our mainstream media, they would think we were all literally about to kill each other in the streets.
really?
Absolutely. If you think that like the CNN coverage of the Helsinki summit, you would have imagined we were about to enter the second Cold War and nukes were about to start flying.
But that's always going to happen because Trump's fingers are on the nuclear weapon, which isn't entirely true at all.
Then why is he internationally applauded for his trade policy?
Yeah. It's weird he's done some real good with the trade. We talked about it last week about the Junker stuff.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting because Italy had just cracked down on the migrant crisis.
I did
Then
quickly
they
Google.
elected this new.
I did
I'm
quickly
sorry.
Google U.S. economy, and there was talks um, about Turkey, about U.S. threatening sanctions on them Turkish ministers who threatened the strategic partnership. I don't know if that's some new thing, the strategic partnership.
I believe it has to do with the fact that we have bases across the world,
Mm.
and certain embassies and locations that
Yeah.
we have are tactical
Ah, right,
positions.
right. So economy stuff though. I did notice the article on the Fed leaving rates unchanged, but upgrade the view of the U.S. economy to strong, which is good. That's a great. That's a key to the White House for the president.
Oh, it is, especially entering into the 2018 midterms.
Yeah, I'm still not sure how he's going to do on that, but his approval rating is better than I expected.
Everyone is probably going to either love him or hate him.
Mm-hmm.
And for those in the middle, they are forced to choose a side based on who they're surrounded by and their personal constitution. If you are a person who doesn't like being talked down to, you are going to vote on Trump's side. If you are a little bit more of a sensitive, shyer type, you are likely going to vote Democrat because you don't want other people to necessarily get on your case about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, it's kind of a very brutal tug, unfortunately, because it's unfounded. It's not how our politics should work.
How should your politics work?
The idea of open discourse, being able to literally hash it out in a open discussion, was basically how our constitution was formed. We had two constitutional congresses in which people got on each other's cases about very important and very integral things that we now believe a couple hundred years later
Mm-hmm.
as the founding ideas of our country. I mean, these guys were hashing it out in broad
Mm-hmm.
daylight, and back then, of course, you also had honor duels. So if somebody ever said something completely out of line, then you could necessarily tell them, "Meet me on the White House, meet me on the town square with a pistol, and we're gonna do it."
Yeah. It's someone in the chat called Steve Brace writes, "For fuck's sake, clueless, totally clueless American. What are you doing, Omegon? Um, can you specify? Because I have no idea what it is that he's clueless about. I'd need more info before I question him on it."
Oh yes, and I would
And
love
yes,
to
Saki,
find
I'm
out.
reading the chat. I've always been reading the chat, Saki. It's just I also have to listen, and I can't multitask. We know this.
I
Um,
too get a little screwy on it,
that's fine.
but yeah, I
Cortez.
do want I do want to hear his opinion, but
Mm,
more along the point, you know, the idea that our politics should work as people being able to have an open discussion and be able to actually hash out arguments and agree to disagree is, in my case, an ideal circumstance for politics.
right.
Unfortunately, we were a lot of people nowadays were raised with the idea of you never talk about money, you never talk about religion, and you never talk about politics.
Yeah.
So we don't know how to deal with it.
I don't know what to say to
We
that.
were never taught.
And yes, Okie Native, I'm indeed fapping into my new... Hang on a sec. The correct spell... Helmut. I'm going to take that one. My new helmet. Okay. Fantastic. I think we should move on to another subject. My turn.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay, so you in the chat, and obviously you Trups as well if you want this, press 1 if you want Boris Johnson to be the Prime Minister. And press 2 if you want Jacob Rees-Mogg. This is important.
I'm sorry. I totally jumped the gun.
Fantastic. They're all going to see that and be like, what's the one for? What's the one for? But what's it for?
2.
Okay, the numbers are coming in. It's
Yeah,
3
I
2
totally
so far.
jumped the gun.
It's 2s and 1s. Oh, we got 2s. We got 1s. Fucking John bemused. Edgy boy. That's what we're talking about. Look at that. All those numbers. Oh, kitten. For shame. Okay. So the reason I bring this up is because in a recent poll of the Tory party members, I think it was a poll done of 1,000, and these are done every year, Boris Johnson tops the list of those to succeed Theresa May as Conservative leader after cabinet resignation. And after his resignation, that is. Now, Rees-Mogg did feature on this. Now, last year, because of the way Brexit was going, he was not as high up. In fact, he was, I think, 5th. And the polling numbers currently, he has 29% of the vote. So 290 votes, okay. He has a 10-point lead over the nearest rival, Saeed Javid, which is the new Home Secretary who took over from Amber Rudd after she lied. If she hadn't lied, she'd still have a job. Jacob Rees-Mogg, though, only secured 13% of the vote. So sadly, he's not as high up. Michael Gove, who, when Theresa May became Prime Minister, he was also challenging with Boris. But he stabbed Boris in the back, and he got 7% of the votes. With David Davis, Jeremy Hunt finishing it out with 4%. No whammons here because you all belong in the kitchen.
And we saw what happened when we gave Theresa May a chance.
Yeah. Oh, and it wasn't... Yeah, one correction. It wasn't last year, it was last month. Johnson was 5th with only 8% of the vote, but his outlook appears to have improved because he quit the cabinet in protest at the Brexit approach. An approach which has now officially been shut down by Michel Barnier, the male negotiator. Michel, seriously.
As controversial as it may be, I'm actually kind of on the same wavelength as John in the chat. I do have some concern if you guys would elect Javid because of how skewed your justice system is already.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot to talk about that. It is quite sad how things have gone. I'd be very apprehensive if and things with Saeed Javid, he's a very moderate. He is moderate, but there will be a moment when it finally happens. I had a friend contact me earlier who went through Croydon. Croydon was when I was a kid. I have aunties that live there, and from what I'd heard, it was a fairly, I'm going to say white area. Now it's just not. There's virtually no white people there anymore, and it actually made her uncomfortable. I was surprised. It didn't surprise me, but it did at the same time. Croydon's a shithole. It's Haiti, basically.
Oh, that's very cool.
This is the first time since 2016 that a Brexiteer tops the website's monthly leadership poll when he gave his backing to the Leave campaign. So it's been a while. Now, this is all because Mrs May's tried to unify her cabinet, and since Gove supports this Chequers plan, him being a Brexiteer as well has kind of, yeah, his popularity's gone. Not that it was ever that high to begin with. Why's the article crashed? Don't do that to me. Where is it? Oh yeah. So when he
the judge outfit.
when he was giving his resignation speech, he did say something quite interesting. He said, "Let us aim explicitly for that glorious vision of Lancaster House." There was a very good speech then. strong, independent, self-governing Britain that is genuinely open to the world, not the miserable permanent limbo of Chequers, not the democratic disaster of ongoing harmonisation with no way out and no say for the UK. The great thing about that piece of the speech, he did not hold back, and I think that was really important. And there was a separate poll, not just this one that's done, but there was a grassroots one for Conservative Home, by Conservative Home, and it suggested that 45% of those grassroots Tories want Theresa May to announce her resignation now.
Well, of course, she's totally butchered the Brexit plan.
Mm-hmm.
And she'll keep doing it, and that's why Boris is in the lead so hard.
Yeah,
I think the reason why a lot of people want Mog is just the way he handles discourse.
Yeah, it does. He does have a way around it. But then, to follow on from Boris Johnson, MPs could be told to vote for what is called a blind Brexit, as Brussels plots a vague offer on future trade to finalise the divorce bill. To get this done, because now we're running out. We are now in such a crunch time. They dawdled so much to the point now where it's absolutely crunch time. Can you imagine though voting on something that is vague? It's basically like the Conservative Manifesto of 2017, which was one of the vaguest manifestos I've ever looked at. Seconded by.
Can you imagine not having to vote on something twice?
Oh God. Oh, and the Labour manifesto of then was no better either. So the EU officials have said that the priority is to get the withdrawal agreement done to ensure that Britain does not crash out without a deal. It will still require a solution for the Irish border amid a months-long standoff on how to avoid infrastructure between the two nations. Something which we're not trying to impose here. We're not going to erect a wall here. They're the ones that have set the bar. They're the ones that are fucking around. Not us. But any attempt now to force the divorce through Parliament without knowing the details of the final trade deal will inevitably prompt outrage from MPs, because it's like the definition of feminism at this point. No one feminist represents all of feminism. No one MP represents all of Brexit. It's that same kind of annoyance. Because
is the population of the UK still pretty much around the idea of a no-deal Brexit?
I think a lot of people are trying to. Everyone I've seen and heard about this, the real world kind of people, are terrified by this idea. They are terrified that it could happen, and I have to keep saying to them, that is the one card we have that stops the EU from bending us over. And if you take it off the table, what do we have left? We have the Chequers plan? It's quite terrible. I want permanent minority government with them having no power, so they can't fuck up anything else. Yeah, I like small government.
Same.
Brexiteers, interestingly, those MPs that support Brexit, are refusing the £40 billion divorce bill without guarantees on trade, because I think the EU wanted the $39 billion as an upfront cost, and it's like,
that's
no,
pretty bold of them.
We're not paying shit up front without any guarantees here, and if you want money, you're not going to be able to just bully us for it.
Well, especially because that basically is a power move, trying to make you remember that you still owe something to them. So it's a pretty ballsy plan. Yeah. Considering they have more to lose than you.
Well, yeah. There is a lot for us to lose, definitely, with trade deficits. With Theresa May now essentially taking over negotiations, she's already been warned not to expect some kind of breakthrough when she talks to Emmanuel Macron on Friday. Just don't. Okay. Yeah, she couldn't negotiate her way out of a freaking hostage situation. She's actually feckless.
That's why Trump offered his lawyers to her to sue the EU.
Yeah. So I'm kind of torn right now. If there's no official, very obvious upfront written out, ironed out agreement, I don't think we should pay anything, and I don't think MPs should vote on something without definitive information on it. Because if it's vague, then it can be interpreted differently by someone else to suit their own will, their own motives, if you want to call it that. No, it sounds very conspiratorial, but I think you know what I mean.
No, it doesn't. When you kind of at this point on, the UK has already been essentially the victim of BS EU policy for however long.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the idea that they're trying to bully you until the very end doesn't necessarily strike me as, a conspiracy. It seems pretty cut and dry, in fact.
Yeah.
It would be like for us saying that, we should pay China to do something for us, to let us out of the trillions of dollars of debt that we have to them. No, they're being dicks to us, so we're imposing harsh, policies against them.
Yeah,
and it's working. That's why the American economy is booming. It's because we are taking back our own country. The concern I have is if there's any kind of deal for the UK with the EU, then you're basically just conceding a major portion of your funds to a person who couldn't honestly care less, except for the fact that their cash cow is moving on.
Yeah, and in chat mentioned here, Britain is one of, if not, oh shit, thank you Tiger Lily, by the way. They wrote here, Britain is one of, Dibula wrote it, one of the strongest economies in the EU and one of the biggest markets. Do you really think the EU could afford not to trade with Britain? Actually, that's a very good point. We are one of the top 3 or 4, I believe, 3, I think, France and Germany being the other 2. We make them a huge amount. Yeah, I saw. Thank you, Tiger Lily, for that donation. It's very kind of you. I think when it comes to, there was a point. Because of how much we bring to the table, I think it was already warned that the EU's budget would be cut by about $250 billion, which is huge. Or is it $250 million? $250 billion makes more sense. Yeah, 250 billion. Yeah, that's it. And so they do need to come up with a deal. A problem arises because they want to trade to their standards, and therefore we must meet their standards with our goods, which is a problem because we had to privatize certain services because we were unable to meet those and be able to afford it. It would damage our economy to do so. While I'm all in favour of getting back the water, I kind of understand why we don't have it.
I'm actually considering something. So let's say that the UK organizes a deal with the United States and has that pretty much set in stone, conditional on Britain leaving the EU, hard Brexit.
Yeah.
You bring that to the table as well. Now you have basically, it's like having a job in your back pocket, right? And going to apply for another job that wants you but isn't really committed to pay you the same.
Yeah.
Well, you can tell that interviewer, say, look, I've got a job offer for such and such funds. If you don't pay me more, I'm very well going to go with this other job.
Yeah.
That's a powerful negotiating tactic as well. The problem is that I think that your MPs, as well as obviously Theresa May, is reluctant to give up the security that the EU offers.
That's why it's very difficult to reason having a Remain voting MP as the Prime Minister. And also why it's very hard to accept that not a single MP could actually consider what would happen if we left. Carlos David. Alright, okay, so the comment, Atomic Burn. I think you Brits should flip them the bird and just make deals with everyone else. Bring the EU to the table and make them concede to at least some of your demands. I agree. In fact, I'd agree if someone just literally, now envision this. Everyone, close your eyes and just imagine this. Our new negotiator is Jacob Rees-Mogg, and he walks up to the table. Michel Barnier is there, smirking like a little shit. And Mogg reaches into his pocket and pulls out his middle finger and walks away. I think if he did that, I think honestly the EU would either have to take us, and then no one contacted them. They call, hang up, and on the final day they call again, and you just answer and go, now give us what we want, you stupid motherfuckers. I don't think it would work, by the way, but it'd be so cool if this shit actually happened.
Oh yeah, but your country would need to grow a set.
We sold our balls around the time we sold all our gold stocks off at the lowest possible value. In fact, I think we just paid someone to take the gold away to raise money, because we're clever. Yep.
Somebody mistypes my name as TrupsLP.
Yeah, Dr. Cap. His name is now
Love it.
TrupsLP. Mog would never do it. He wouldn't, of course not. But it would be. Can you just imagine that? Just picture Mog flipping someone off. I might tweet to him. Can you please take a picture of yourself with your middle finger up? That'd be awesome.
I would kind of want to see somebody with a hard Brexit take the prime minister.
Yeah.
And then I also want to see Jordan Peterson take over the prime minister from fucking Trudeau in Canada.
Oh, Trudeau, I'm not convinced.
Powerhouse.
Yeah, I'm not convinced he'll win a second term anyway. His economic policies are embarrassing. Oh, but we needed change. That's why we had to get rid of Harper. Because we needed change. Okay. How's that 5 years worked out for you?
Not so good, huh? Mom jeans.
Yeah, he does. He's pretty sad.
It's
okay. So your do you have? Would you like? Is there something else? You wanted topic you'd like to add?
Well, I actually, ironically, as much as the American media would love to talk about it, I would love to talk about this Russian collusion situation.
Oh, the Mueller thing, yeah?
Yeah. It's gotten to be a little bit more complicated because the biggest complaint that the left-wing media had given at Trump was that he never mentioned Russian collusion during the Helsinki summit. But the White House press conference that I sent you earlier today confirms by Intelligence Committee officers, Department of Homeland Security, all these guys.
Yeah.
They all confirmed that he told them immediately, personally, that this was of the utmost importance and you must secure our elections.
Okay.
So what I think is very odd about it is they have painted Trump as this weak, bent to Russia, didn't mention collusion publicly thing.
Yeah.
Except now, after that press conference, they're kind of eating it.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to see how this narrative ends up playing out, because for the past 2-3 weeks since the Helsinki summit, that's all they've been saying. So what are they going to do? Be like, whoops, we made a mistake. I guess Trump doesn't have to tell us everything.
Well, I'd heard he could, in fact, just end the investigation now. But if he did, he'd not lose the House member-wise, but he'd lose the congressman there.
I think he would lose support.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Instead of being, it would be like, it would be like blocking somebody while there's an argument happening. If you let it play out and they find themselves to be wrong, then you have been proven correct in the court of public opinion.
Yeah.
But if you shut down the conversation, then you look weak, as if you had something to hide in the first place. So yeah, he could theoretically end it, but he would rather somebody else come up with the balls to, actually believe in something and actually stand for something when they know damn well over the 2 years that they've been investigating this that it's a lie.
It'd be quite interesting to see how it ends, because, with all the crap that's been going on for so long about that, I am very much interested to see how it ends.
Well, right now they're trying Paul Manafort for basically not registering as a foreign agent, is technically how it goes, because of how he was able to, I believe it's complicated because campaign finance reform is definitely not my strong suit.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, he had dealings with foreign nationals, and both Manafort and Hillary's campaign, one of her advisors as well, literally were the same, had the same situation going. Manafort got indicted, the other one did not. So the reason why Trump is calling for this investigation to end, I don't know if you saw the Twitter thing. He said that basically this was absolutely bullshit and they need to stop this trial immediately. It's because it's blatant favoritism,
Right.
and it's honestly a witch trial. So it's a very odd situation because they're kind of just indicting him because they had something on him, as opposed to this is illegal and so we are investigating this. No, they're like, he worked with Trump and did something illegal. We're going to fucking pin it on him and put it on the headline of every newspaper for the next 4 months.
Is this investigation, is it expensive?
Extremely.
Unless they have something, why are they persisting?
Because the people who put them into power have a vested interest in them finding something.
Taking this long either means you have something or you've got nothing and you're bluffing.
Exactly.
And wasting resources.
They have been bluffing for quite some time.
If you're going to do it this long, you need to show your hand at some point or tease something. And by tease, I mean actually just show us something. Fuck's sake.
Well, every time they try to show you something, somebody comes out and explains why it was either fabricated, it was fake news, or it was just a blatant lie or favoritism.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
For example, Steele dossier, fabricated.
Oh, the Steele dossier.
And paid for by the Hillary campaign.
Oh, that shit was amazing.
The indictment of Manafort, blatant favoritism. Russian collusion. Well, no, because Hillary had literally just sold, I believe it was 20-something% of U.S. uranium to Russia.
Yeah, and got a huge donation to her charity, didn't she?
Yes. So, I mean, who's really vested in Russia here? It sounds more like Hillary is, isn't it?
Well, her dealings certainly don't help, do they?
They make her vulnerable. If I were doing something, wrong, I too would want to put both the American populace and the Russian media and the Russian government in my pocket, because I am puppeteering both those people. I need to control both of them so they don't start colluding with one another to take down me.
Yeah.
Yes, Hillary is like the Corbyn of America, except with more money.
Unlike, he does not have money. I mean, he may live in Islington North, which is a somewhat wealthy area. He lives in a crappy little house and makes decent money, but apparently he doesn't spend it. But doesn't seem to have any either.
If he has a lot of money but doesn't spend it, that means they can't catch him on tax evasion.
Oh,
if he has it all in
politicians' taxes are done publicly, so you know how much he's earned, how much he's spent, and how much all this. The guy, you can tell he doesn't buy nice new suits or anything. He's thrifty.
Well, what I meant was, if you're paid in cash, then if you don't spend anything, then they'll never trace it.
Yeah, and Psaki...
If you have an asset...
Yeah, Psaki might be right. He makes money by shagging political tokens. Yes, he might do. I don't think Abbott pays for the privilege to ride his old peen.
Oh my god.
Yeah, they're both old though, so just think about that. Just imagine this. He's nearly 70. That droopy ballsack teabagging her.
Oh, please.
Now that you've got that image in your head.
I don't need this.
Now that you've got that image in your head, I'm going to give you some fantastic news. Where British courts have decided to recognise Sharia law for the first time, but it's not what you think. Where they've decided to rule that a wife that was married in an Islamic ceremony called a nikah in 1998 can make a claim on the husband's assets under UK law. Which, when you hear the first bit, you're like, Sharia law, oh god, it's all over, it's all over. No, not entirely true. It's more because they're married and they've lived in the UK together. After a certain number of years, if you're not married, you're basically considered married anyway under common law.
We have something similar, actually.
But also, couples, for the most part, when they break up, yeah, the partner gets half your shit, mate.
We want prenup. We want prenup.
Yeah, this is one of those weird things, because obviously, we recognise marriage, civil ceremony, that stuff. We recognise that as marriage, or a form of binding of two people, legally. So if you conduct a different ceremony and then try and fob it off as something else, you still have to do the other thing, or get it in a courtroom, I think, to have it officially made official in the United Kingdom. Officially made it official? To have it made official.
Now, do you guys have a separate classification? So, like, we have a marriage license, but then we also have the thing that that homosexuals were able to get. I forget
civil
the name
partnership.
of it right now. So, thank you.
We have both. We have both. We introduced civil partnership as something for gay people to get married with, but then we permitted marriage, and now we've permitted civil partnerships for straight people, which did take a while. My view on it is quite simple. The word marriage was appropriated, so if you're not that religious, it's not marriage. It's a civil partnership. As long as you receive the same perks and tax breaks or whatever else, I don't care. Because they're both the same thing, really. It's just one word.
You're basically just agreeing to live with this person until somebody dies or gets
yeah,
sick
it's
of
a
the
room.
other
It's
one.
basically Sheldon's roommate agreement, but with sex. Congratulations.
What?
It's a Big Bang Theory thing.
Oh, yes.
But in any case, they're not under English law. They're not legally married. They're married under Sharia law only. I don't care for Sharia law, but I'm ignoring it because I believe that they've acted under the common law thing. The court ruled that the union should be considered valid, which is now where the problem arises, because the vows had similar expectations of a British marriage contract. My view is, if we're going to accept this, it's either going to be enshrined in a law, which means parts of Sharia will be in our law, which is dangerous, or we're going to have them go through a separate ceremony to make it official in British law, via a different ceremony entirely.
Something that I'm not quite understanding is if the UK is adopting facets of Sharia law as essentially what seems like precedent in a court case,
Yeah.
then they would probably do better to enshrine the things they do want. Let's say, a person who was married under Islamic Sharia law, like a marriage there, that counts as marriage in UK law. If they want to enshrine that in a policy, go ahead and do that. I think the concern is less about Sharia law being enshrined in policy, but more in precedent, because precedent is often more so, at least, than policy is.
Yeah. There was a couple interesting things about this article. Firstly, that the barrister for the defence, so the ex-husband, said issues being considered went to the heart of the understanding of the law of marriage and divorce in British society, and that the divorce ruling would likely be considered in full by Muslims. It could lead to more Muslims who are bound to a marriage they don't want to be a part of, adding to that statistic of failed marriages. But the really interesting is that when she was Home Secretary, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, had asked for a review to explore whether Sharia law was being applied in a way that was incompatible with domestic legislation. How fascinating. Which also led to a panel of experts saying that Muslim couples should be required to undergo civil marriages in addition to Muslim ceremonies to bring Islamic marriage legally in line with Christian and Jewish marriage, which I tend to agree with. But I'm quite
Yeah,
interested
I
in
would say
Theresa
so.
May's, Sharia law thing, because that's quite interesting. Whether it is incompatible or not, we know it's not compatible. We know that because it's fucking abhorrent.
So this actually kind of falls into the same kind of topic that I had brought up to you earlier when we were just chatting. And I'm going to ask you again here. Do you think that parts of your police force have been subverted by
Hmm.
the politicians, commissioners, etc.?
We know this. We know this is true. They have been. They've allowed themselves to out of fear, and which is in and of itself an unprofessional way to approach their job. Their job is to uphold the law, and then when they don't get it, they scapegoat by either saying they don't understand it or arrest the innocent person who brought it to their attention because someone else complained that they weren't allowed to do something that they were not allowed to do in the first place, but they thought they could do and get away with because Muslim. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, Sargon of Akkad's video about Sharia law is fantastic. It
It
really
hits
is.
it hits on a very important topic that a sergeant in the Metropolitan Police was a Muslim woman who
Mm-hmm.
was assigned to a Muslim task force that was basically to, uh, what was it? Basically to keep the community and Muslims living together peacefully and happily. But
Yeah.
it basically turned into the Muslims who worked for that detachment were, I guess you could actually say, sexually harassing her by
Mm-hmm.
saying she should get down on her knees by the way that, she was disgracing herself under Allah and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting situation where you now have literal detachments of police forces going after their own people just because, well, they're women. And
Yeah.
this is the UK, the one who is supposed to be better than us. That whole SJW shit.
Yeah. Also, to Dr. Cap, should see the state of the mopeds in London and how the parents of those in the gang go against the police, even though their kids are in the wrong. It's not surprising, because and I'm going to take a quote from some shitty Londoners. We don't grass on anyone. Get fucked. Kids using zombie knives to try and break into cars. You fucking pricks.
Zombie knives?
Yeah.
Oh my god, how old is this shit?
Very recent, actually.
Oh my god. Because I remember, okay, maybe it's just a slang term, but I remember zombie knives is like something when I was a kid too.
Yeah,
And it was basically just a neon shit with like a
Oh
biohazard
no, this is
symbol.
a different knife.
Oh, okay.
Actually called go and Google a zombie knife now. They're very
Okay.
different. But it's cropped up time and time again. It sucks. They need to stop doing this shit. It's getting embarrassing. Um, we fight it.
Uh,
Tommy Robinson is a warning if these people ever get any real power. Yes. Tommy Robinson's stuff is fascinating, and I'm really curious to see what he does now, because his channel has continued to thrive. Obviously, I don't think he has a Twitter anymore, but I don't think that matters, because he can write a book on this. That's how big it is. It's lucrative for him, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, especially with how he was treated and how the retrial, if it all happens, how that will or will not go down. Because I don't see him
it'll
getting
be
sent back again. If he does, he'll probably get a fine, which he could do a crowdfund for, honestly.
it'll be very hard for the next judge to pass the same judgment,
Mm-hmm.
and just because the first judge found him guilty and sentenced him to prison, then the appellate judge ruled that it was illegal and immoral for them to do such a thing. It was not professional, it wasn't done correctly. So
Yep.
now the third judge has a very hard situation to handle.
Well, not just that, they've got
If
to
he
find someone that hasn't seen, for juries especially, they've got to find one that hasn't seen the video or know anything about Tommy Robinson.
Yeah, pretty much.
Good luck with
Um,
that.
yeah, good luck. It's an
I
international
hear, I hear, I hear
phenomenon.
there's a couple Amazonian tribes. You could try and bring them over. They might not have Wi-Fi over there.
I think there's cannibalistic pygmies too.
Find an altruist camp.
Some Amish maybe.
Ah, the Amish. Their
Do you guys have
ridiculous
those?
hairstyles. No. But bring them over. Get them over here on a plane.
You have gypsies, don't you?
We do, but gypsies like him.
Oh, you're fucked, I guess. Well,
yeah.
I guess not.
Sorry. Did you have any other topics you wanted to talk about today?
No, but I'd be interested to see if the chat has any questions for either of us.
I have one more topic. One
my
more.
Apologies.
It's a rather amusing one. So,
all right, go for it.
What do you know about South Africa?
The last I heard about South Africa, white farmers were being quote unquote encouraged to abdicate their farms.
Right. You've actually hit this exact what we're going to talk about. South Africa's white farmers have blasted the government's decision to endorse constitutional changes in order to speed up the redistribution of white-owned land to the country's poor black community as catastrophic. It's very important to note, just because they're black doesn't mean they'll know how to farm it. Skilled farmers do the job. It's also interesting to note that I've seen the video of this, where some white farmers from South Africa have moved to Russia, and they've been welcomed with open arms, been treated with respect, because they've wanted to move there and get away and start again, build a farm, and get on with things. And Russia's farming business economy is growing quite nicely. So it's quite interesting to see, what's his name, President Zuma or something? So, more than 2 decades after the end of apartheid, whites still own most of South Africa's land, and ownership remains a highly emotive subject, because those people who are doing something that benefits your country are bad because they're white. And the only way to fix this is to give it to people who are poor, who will totally do good by it, just like those farmers did in Zimbabwe.
I was going to say, Zimbabwe is a really good indication of how this is going to go.
Yeah. I mean, the current president is Cyril Ramaphosa.
Foreign.
Yeah. He said that his party will push ahead with the plans which will allow for the expropriation of land without compensation. Which I think is very... I guess it depends on how the land was acquired. If it was acquired and bought fairly, then it's fine. I think if it's been owned for a certain amount of time, or if it was owned only by bad people, then that's fine. But if it's owned by good people, you need to also argue, understand here that if the land is being taken away from those that benefit your economy, then you're really setting yourself up for a fail here.
I think the only way that could work is if you had a reasonable expectation or reasonable knowledge that the people taking over the farm knew how to work a farm. Like if you were going to redistribute it to just anybody, probably not the best plan. If you're going to redistribute it to like other black farmers who have like adjacent farms, I could understand maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I still don't agree, but at least you could say you're not completely killing all of your farmers.
Well, that's the interesting thing here. You've got AfriForum, an organisation that mostly represents white South Africans on issues like affirmative action, said in a statement that land expropriation without compensation would have catastrophic results like Venezuela and Zimbabwe. History teaches us that international investors, regardless of what AfriForum or anyone else says, are unwilling to invest in a country where property rights are not protected.
That makes a very good point, actually, now that I think about it, because most potato farms in Idaho were completely owned in part by McDonald's.
Yeah.
So if you can't trust that farm is going to produce X amount of potatoes a year, then you wouldn't invest in it. So that actually quite makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. They also said that this move will lead to anarchy and cause murder rate to spike between 21 to 22,000, with a quote being, we're really heading for a state of anarchy if something doesn't change drastically. There are places where the police simply refuse to act, sounds like London. They don't know the law well enough or refuse to apply it to logical reasoning when it comes to defending people's property rights. It's a very big concern. And this taking away the land, there is a reason for it. I've got the Here we go. South Africa's ruling African National Congress, they're forging ahead with the constitution, changing the constitution, which is section 25, because they need to amend it. Because many experts believe that if land is taken from a property owner, compensation must be just and equitable. To some, just and equitable could mean no compensation, depending on the circumstances in which previous occupants or owners were deprived of or removed from the land, either in British colonial times or under apartheid. Citing recent public hearings, the President said South Africans wanted the Constitution to make clear when compensation was or was not justified. It's quite reasonable to want to know when it's justified, but his entire idea is to push ahead and just take it.
How would you even go about proving repossession of land?
Well, the really dangerous part is economically only accounts for just under 3% of the national output, but employs over 850,000 people, which is 5% of the workforce. If you have a threat to production or employment, then you fan food inflation and hurt mostly low-income households. If his plan doesn't work, hundreds of thousands of people suffer, as if they're not already suffering anyway.
If they go about taking land, what will happen is other low-income households will start to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
The government will look at the low-income households and say they need assistance, and provide them, we'll call it a welfare bonus, and they'll help subsidize the land.
Yeah, one of the biggest complaints was that this move is a dishonor to Mandela's memory. I'm not sure if it is or not, but I do think that it is racist.
Oh, without a doubt.
You can't say that, but then again, in South Africa, there is affirmative action for white people. So, yeah. Yeah. I did see...
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, I don't know how to react to that. I know that Zimbabwe are starting to back off on the policy, but I think a lot of the white farmers are refusing to take the land back and do good by it because they can't be fucked.
Well, they can't expect the government to treat them well if they're about to sink hours of their life and effort and money into sustaining a farm that very well could be taken away from them in the next year.
What's the point? That's why property rights must be protected. I agree entirely.
Above all else. I mean,
it's in your constitution, is it not?
I'm not necessarily sure that property rights are necessarily enshrined in the Constitution.
Are they in a Bill of Rights, or?
It's kind of over-encompassing.
Yeah.
It's like, if you own land, you get the right to vote by the original Constitution, and then eventually that was extended to women can have the right to own land. To eventually that meant that women could have the right to vote. And then once, at the time when the Constitution was written, some black people did own land, so that was why they count for 3/5 of the vote.
Oh, that 3/5 thing. Yes, I remember that.
So, I mean, property rights were more or less assumed.
Fifth Amendment.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's...
Okay, thank you, Dibula. Okay. It sounds quite messy. But just to be clear, I do not support South Africa doing what they're doing. I think that you are taking away homes from people as well. You're doing it under obviously, I know that your country's been through some really shitty shit. I get it, but to simply, I know it's very it seems to be very undemocratic about it.
Yeah, I'm seeing that, Dibula. I do see the way you use it. You have to understand. I live in an apartment, so I actually, I don't own anything, and I have to pay taxes on my car that I own. So what really do I own here?
We have the same thing. If anything exists, you pay tax on it. I'm surprised I haven't got a bill yet to pay tax on my helmet.
Oh, I love it too. We have in the state I live, there's a vehicle tax. So like
Yeah, we
you
have
have
that.
to
Yeah.
pay. eh, Oh my God.
Tax,
I got it.
insurances, it's ridiculous.
And if I don't pay it, guess what? I can't drive my own fucking car.
Yeah.
Fifth Amendment says that isn't true, but
Over
in
time,
realistic
new taxes will be
terms,
created to make sure everything you could ever have and exist with is taxed. Probably the air you breathe will be privatized one day.
oh
Anyway,
yeah,
anyway,
it's
is there anything
I
else
have a buddy.
you wanted to add to this subject?
Oh, I just thought it was funny because one of my buddies is a hardcore libertarian,
Oh,
and one of the images he always shares is usually where there is either vehicle tax or road tax mentioned.
uh-huh.
And he goes, "If it would please the crown, would I be able to drive the car which I own and am taxed on the roads which I pay taxes in order to sustain?"
I like.
Oh, he's great. I love him sometimes. He has a good amount of right wing memes, the best memes.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Um, as I'm done with all the subjects I have, and I assume you are as well, is there anything you'd like to add before I end the stream? Like perhaps shield yourself. You're in the description if anyone's interested.
Yes, if you guys would be so kind, if you like the way I talk about things in a more philosophical and uh, that kind of sort of way, I have a bunch of different topics existing on my channel where I basically explore some of the mentality behind certain policies and different ideas which we all were brought up with. So if you guys want to come by and watch my videos, I won't be upset, and I'd actually quite appreciate it.
Brilliant. Also, if you could slap a like on this stream, that would greatly help this channel. I think we're done here now, actually. Say goodbye, Trups.
Goodbye,
Trups.
Trups.
That's it, yeah. Okay, his link is in the description, Christopher. Thank you all for listening, and good night.